we're first going to go to a great friend of mine, Rob Anderson in New York. Rob, you are up with the great Merril Hoge.
Scott, I gotta pay homage to that sweatshirt again, and I appreciate everyone's patience with the Walter Payton jerseys. Our second born is named Payton, and Walter is a steadfast fixture in our life. Merril, I am humble and grateful to connect, and I would like to, over the course of your career, I watched you transition from fullback in the days when fullback was a position in the NFL and the times of the Mike Allstott and the Tom Rathmans. Thanks for your patience with the noise. And then from transitioning to tailback and ultimately to H-back, you have incredible hands and you can do so much. And I really thought that you were fantastic as a commentator. I'm not just blowing smoke, but I really did. Your energy, your positive nature. And I watched you transition from that. And you always look really sharp on camera as well. So, Merril, now that you're out of football and not on camera on a weekly basis, what does that transition look like for you as far as what direction to go in? And how do you know what direction to go in based on all that you've accomplished and all that you've experienced? Super grateful for you.
Well, Rob, I appreciate that. And I love the Walter Payton love. There's I could spend an hour actually sharing Walter Payton stories. And actually, Walter Payton will be significant in this answer in a way. And Chuck Noll, there's a mixture. You know, Chuck Noll was a tremendous leader. What makes a great leader is they're consistent, they have integrity, and they know how to challenge and teach. And Chuck was great at challenging us to be wise and judicious when we left the season. You know, he said, listen, you got a stage very few get. Don't abuse it, but use it. You know, do things to look for your life's work. First time I ever heard your life's work. When I got drafted, I'm like, well, here's my life's work. And he was like, this is not your life's work. I don't care how long you play. And even Tom Brady will not play longer than he does play, even if he plays another 5 years. So that being said, he was instrumental in widening my scope about being prepared to do other things. I was just wise enough to realize that I'm sitting in front of a guy I probably never sit in front of again. I'm grateful for that, and I listened. I remember I went back and got my education, and then I started working on different things that I would want to do when I got done playing. Well, that tool set really helped me when my career ended early in Chicago. Even though I went through a depression, I went through a period of time that I can identify with people who have lost everything, who have no purpose, and things spiral out of control. I'm helping and working with a program right now where I mentioned to them, I go, you know, one of the most important things when someone's going through depression, they're struggling emotionally, there's still a point of accountability. There's a moment where you're still accountable and you still have to take a part of people that are trying to help you and the things that you've done. And I was laying on the couch and I remember thinking that, I was like, I'd been to counseling, I'd been a month or so, my career had ended. And I'm like, gosh dang, you have responsibility in this. You know, you can be miserable the rest of your life and lay on this couch because you no longer can do the thing that you've been doing for 22 years. But for almost a decade, you've been working on your life's work and you'd created some other avenues. And so the two of them that I'd worked on were coaching and broadcasting, ironically, at the time. And I really casted my lines out everywhere. I went in every relationship that I could remember or I had built. And I went down that and I said, whichever fish I catch first, that's where I'm going, whether it's coaching or broadcasting. And broadcasting, actually, it was ESPN hired me to launch ESPN2. And Mr. Rooney actually hired me to be the first player in the broadcasting booth for the Steelers, which most people don't know that. And that's okay because I hardly ever talked, so nobody knew I was there. But what I'm getting at is I learned to have other things in the make for when my career was over. So at ESPN, I'd written a book and I'd loved speaking. And honestly, that challenge came from sitting in a chemotherapy chair. I had a dear friend, I was telling him actually about Find a Way, actually, how this whole thing had come about. And he was like, well, you need to write a book. I said, Charlie, I survive, I'll write your book. And I really put it off there. About a year later, he called me up. He said, remember that deal? And I was like, God, Charlie. Yeah, but that took me like 5 years to write that book. But, and this is why I talk about taking action. If you take action, it takes you places. So that challenge, after I'd written that book, while I'm in my broadcasting career, speaking became such a passionate part of what I like to do, that when my career ended at ESPN, I was already branching out into that. And I had already really had vision. I wasn't going to do this for 50 years. I liked speaking so much. There were some other things that moved me. And so I did have another option that I had prepared for, but I go all the way back to being 21 and Chuck Noll talking about your life's work, use the stage, don't abuse the stage, and branch out to things. And he said, I remember, this is actually something I've learned when people I maybe have not prepared because they expect to be in a career, okay, whatever they're in right now. And then, I mean, shoot, just a year ago, I'm sure a lot of people's careers got disrupted, and people are probably doing things different now than they were doing a couple of years ago, and they never expected that. I've run into a lot of people like that, and they're like, what do you do? Where do you go? And I'm like, well, I always start with your passion. What do you really love? What do you love doing? What do you want to do? What moves you? And if you can find ways to move into that as your craft, then I was always felt like that gave you an advantage, because you're passionate enough with it, you love it, and you'll stay committed to it, and you'll find something. There's so many people that didn't think of it that way, or they're thinking about, well, let me go get a job. And that's okay sometimes too. Sometimes that's just a requirement, and that's just where you got to go. But if you can have ways where you can feed your passion, and sometimes a passion evolves, like speaking evolved. If you saw my grades in high school and college for speaking, you'd be like, in fact, my professors probably like, are you kidding me? And when I wrote 2 books, you talk about some other professors going, oh my gosh, there's hope for everybody if that cat can write some books. So I go back to the journey, like so many people have inspired me. I mean, Chuck Noll may be one of the greatest to open my mind and widen my scope to things to be prepared for and different ways to go about things. And I did not learn that tool set early. I think I could have been in trouble, especially the way my career ended, because I had done so much work in preparing for that. I had options. Had I done no work, that would have probably been a more than devastating thing in my life, even though it was devastating at the time.
Love it.